Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Eric Haseltine will join us. He's a former Associate Director of National Intelligence of the U.S. Intelligence Community, Director of Research at NSA, currently serves as the Chairperson of the U.S. Technology Leadership Council. Prior to his work in the national security area, he was Executive Vice President of Walt Disney Imagineering and Head of Research and Development for the Walt Disney Company. He has 70 patents, has written hundreds of popular science articles for Discover Magazine and Psychology Today, and has authored a number of books, including this one with Dr. Chris Gilbert called The New Science of UFOs. Eric, welcome to the program.
George, great to be here. Thanks.
How did you get involved in studying UFOs?
I was asked to be the hard science expert on a show now airing on History and A&E called Alien Files Reopened.
Aha.
And so I'm kind of the guy who looks at the evidence through a scientific lens and said, could this be possible or not?
What is your take on what's been happening in Congress lately? Are we getting any closer?
It's hard to say because it's not a simple phenomenon. On the one hand, you have congressmen who have kind of bought into some of the more exotic theories without necessarily a lot of data. On the other hand, there is a lot of data that suggests something real is going on. So it's a combination of people who are acting more emotionally, let's say, and some who are legitimately concerned about national security. So, as is everything else in the government, it's not simple.
Is it conceivable, Doctor, that some of this could be Russian, Chinese, maybe even ours?
It's very conceivable. In fact, Sean Kirkpatrick said that more often than not, it's ours. And that could be classified programs. Certainly, the way Area 51 had been used historically in other places like White Sands and China Lake and so forth, there certainly are advanced aircraft flying around that are new and do things that current aircraft can't do. My belief is that we aren't looking at one phenomena. We're looking at multiple phenomena. And some of those probably are U.S. programs. Some of them might be hobbyists doing interesting things with drones. In the book, we talk a lot about the possibility of foreign activity. On the one hand, doing legitimate things with real advanced aircraft, and then the other, trying to fake such things for their own purposes. So I think it's a combination of things. And I will say this, I've been in close touch with my former colleagues inside the government, and my belief is they don't really have a clue. They know certain things that the general public doesn't. For example, they have classified sensors that they don't want to reveal their capabilities, and they've probably captured some things, and they're not being released, not because there's some secret about aliens, but because the sources and methods are too sensitive to be talked about. But other than that, I think, from all I've been able to gather, they really don't have a clue what's happening.
Could there be a secret agency within government that most government workers and officials don't even know exist that deals primarily with this?
No, I don't think so. Certainly when I was there, and I was in a position to basically know everything, there was nothing like that.
What startled you, shocked you, impressed you the most when you were putting the new science of UFOs together with Dr. Chris Gilbert?
Well, the first thing that got me is the lack of imagination, in my belief, that's gone into this. What's happened with the recent congressional hearings and the conclusion that this is real, there's something real going on here, whatever real means. And that's attracted some hardcore scientists that were keeping this subject at arm's length. And Dr. Gilbert, my wife, and I are two of those people. And so even though we weren't ufologists before we started, we brought a fresh perspective to the problem. And I've been shocked by the lack of imagination. And I'll give you some examples.
Okay.
Usually when people talk about the alternative possibilities, they list three broad categories. Human activity of some sort, either American or foreign, or some kind of human perceptual error. And in the book, I'm a neuroscientist, brain scientist, and I talk about how errors in perception could account for some of the sightings. Then they talk about natural phenomena. Is it ball lightning? Something like that. And then, of course, the third option is ETs. And they say among those three alternatives, the truth is out there somewhere. But in 80 years, really, since the Foo Fighters and the first flying saucers, despite collecting zillions of sightings and data, we're really no closer to the truth. And when we approached this problem, we started from scratch and said, why is that? Why, despite all this data, are we not any closer to the right answers? And we believe one likely reason is that people aren't asking the right questions. So we approached the problem asking completely different questions that really haven't been asked much or if at all. And I can give you some examples of that. When you see the sudden acceleration and deceleration, supersonic activity that doesn't yield a sonic boom, those are some of the observables. Mm-hmm. People say, well, that would crush any human. Therefore, they must have some kind of inertia canceling capability, which, by the way, physics doesn't know how to do that. That doesn't mean it's impossible.
Right.
We don't know how to do it now.
Our physics doesn't understand it.
That's right. And by the way, what we know of physics is probably so much less than what there is to be known. And we always have to bear in mind that our brains may not be able to completely understand physics, ultimately. But the point I'm getting at is we're assuming that these things have mass, and a pretty big mass like a normal airplane. What if they don't? What if they have zero mass? Then it would take very little force to move them. And it's interesting, George, that the U.S. Navy has a patent on something that does that precisely. It's a laser holographic type projector which creates plasmas in the air in the outline or shape of an airplane. And you can move those around just as fast as you can move any laser light show.
And they look real, don't they?
They look real. They have a patent on it. And so that's an example of, say, well, not how much energy could these things have to get that kind of propulsion with that kind of mass, but how low of mass could they have? And people, we have found, haven't asked that question. And a related question that hasn't been asked is, what if these things are not internally powered at all, but driven by an external force, such as a photon beam?
Dr. Chris Gilbert with us now, an MD physician with a PhD in physiology, and has written extensively on pioneering techniques in mind-body medicine, including the book The Listening Cure. A frequent co-author with her husband, Eric Haseltine, who you just listened to. She has written 4 books, has over 100 articles in Psychology Today. A longtime member of the Doctors Without Borders and actress and radio personality, Dr. Chris Gilbert's recent work focuses on astrobiology and extraterrestrial life. And how did a medical doctor get involved in looking at UFOs, Chris?
Hi, George. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I've always loved solving mysteries. I went into medicine because it's a fascinating field where physicians act as detectives to solve mysteries of symptoms. So my own opinion about our body is that it has a mind of its own. Like it's a little alien that I need to understand. So it has needs that are different than the brain, and if those needs are not met, it will let the brain know, sometimes with symptoms like headache, back pain, neck pain, etc. So my goal is to understand those needs. So I love mysteries. And because I spent my entire life focusing on understanding the body and the mind and their relationship, focusing on UFOs is similar. because it's focusing on something alien and trying to solve a mystery, which is really exciting.
Have we used astrobiology to try to explain the significance of UFOs?
We have. I mean, astrobiology is a great field. You know, it studies the origin and future of life in the universe, the search for planetary biosignatures of past or present extraterrestrial life, and it shows that there are extremophile organisms that can withstand the vacuum of space, that can withstand high radiation, ultra-low temperatures, ultra-high temperatures. You know, some extremophiles thrive in ice, in boiling water, in extreme acid medium, in alkaline medium. Some of them thrive in the water core of nuclear reactors, in toxic waste. We didn't know that could be possible before. So that could be the origin of UFOs. I mean, there are lichen, fungi, bacterium, yeast, seeds that can survive in extreme habitats like this. And we've talked about tardigrades. Tardigrades, they're not considered true extremophiles, but they're considered extremotolerant microorganisms, and they have contributed a lot to the field of astrobiology. And there's countless, did you know that there are countless tiny organisms that have been found on the surface of the International Space Station, forming what's called a biofilm? That's amazing. And recently, the Webb Space Telescope might have found trace of a compound called dimethyl sulfoxide in the atmosphere of an exoplanet 120 light years from Earth in the constellation of Leo. And this chemical, the dimethyl sulfoxide, is usually a product of life forms. So there might be life forms out there in those constellations, or even closer to us. You know, Jupiter's moon, Europa, Saturn's moon, and Enceladus are now considered the most likely locations for extraterrestrial life in the solar system. So could that be the origin of UFOs? It's very possible.
Do you think, Chris, that we are being visited by physical extraterrestrial beings?
Well, what is the definition of extraterrestrial beings? It could just be just one cell, or just a collection of single cells. That's very possible. There are even, in our body, there are bacteria that we don't know that existed. It's just amazing what we can find in just our body. The Stanford University researchers did a survey on DNA fragments circulating in the blood, and that research suggested that microbes living within us are vastly more diverse than previously known. In fact, 99% of that DNA has never been seen before. And then there's an entirely new class of life that has been found in the human digestive system called obelisks, microscopic rods made of RNA that we didn't know about. We have no idea about what they do. So, yes, there are organisms that are visiting us, and we don't know what they are. They are unknown until now, and we still have to find state-of-the-art microscopes to study them.
You talk about exo-psychology in the book. What does that mean?
So, exo-psychology, that is definitely the study of extraterrestrial. So, that is very interesting.
Is it important to the study of UFOs?
Yeah, it's a new study of perception, cognition, and emotion in extraterrestrial intelligence. So it's very important for the study of UFOs because if at least some of UFOs are extraterrestrials, Exo-psychology helps us imagining the motivations and behaviors that are radically different from what would motivate humans to behave the way UFOs do. For instance, extraterrestrial might come here for none of the reasons we imagine. We usually imagine that extraterrestrial look like humans or are a mix of humans and animals that could come here to conquer us or for scientific research or even to interbreed. But what if it's none of those? What if ET don't derive from animal forms, but they derive from plants? What if they don't derive from any of those? What if they don't require food or water to survive? What if they are immortal and don't sexually reproduce? What if they have no written or spoken language? What if they don't emotionally bond with others and they are not a social species? What if they are not curious and not aggressive? What if they are a collection of just one single cell that originate, develop, and live in space and not on a planet? And what if they use a type of propulsion unknown to men? And what if they don't derive directly from biology? But what if they are hyper-advanced digital AIs? And what if they are made of dark matter, feeding on dark energy? I mean, those are all things we have to consider, and that's all exopsychology. Trying to imagine what they are, what they're thinking, and why they would come here.
What if they're robots?
Exactly. They could be. Exactly. It's very possible, and we have to imagine all of those. We can't keep any door closed. We have to be open to all the possibilities, and that's what we do in our book. And we've got fantastic pictures. We really put a lot of work on those pictures to show everybody what could be the explanation of UFOs. You could actually just look at the book just only looking at the pictures.
You've got great pictures in the book. You're absolutely right. Is it possible, is it conceivable that ETs originate from other planets, but they may be trying to abduct human beings for some reason?
Well, that's what we're saying. Anything is possible. We can't say that this is not possible. But it's true that we've always thought about that it could be. So, but what if it's completely the opposite? What if they're not even aware of us? They're just they're just exploring the whole universe, and they're not aware that what we are and what we're doing. Anything is possible, and that's the beauty of trying to imagine everything and anything.
In your heart of hearts, do you agree with your husband, Eric?
That's a good question. Well, in my heart of heart, I do. Eric thinks that a few UFOs, the ones the military can't explain, are examples of science we don't yet know,
right,
and maybe can't imagine. I agree. But I think they could be more accessible than that, possibly the result of very advanced technology from foreign actors or from someone in the U.S. with drones or experimental flying vehicles. But, whatever, in any case, I think whatever it is, I think it's a fantastic and fascinating mystery. And I think that everybody should look at what is happening in the sky on a regular basis during the day or at night, document what they see. And if they see something puzzling and unexplainable, film it if possible and file a report with the National UFO Reporting Center. We could use everybody's help. That's my opinion.
What do you think of the thousands of people who report seeing UFOs? Are they telling the truth? Are they delusional? What are they?
I think they're telling the truth. There is no reason to think that they're lying. A study in Australia showed that the vast majority of UFO reporters genuinely believed what they reported.
Yeah.
My own husband, Eric, saw a UFO in Arizona, and I believe him. Reports from Air Force personnel sound very genuine, and they seem genuinely worried about possible collisions between a UFO and the plane they pilot, especially because the number of UFOs seem to be increasing recently. And there has been a few close calls where a UFO has come dangerously close to a military plane and some commercial flights. So I think I do believe the people that report those, and I think it's urgent to find out what those UFOs are for safety reasons.
When you talk about safety, is there a conceivable possibility that we could be, as humans, harmed?
We don't know. Again, I have no idea. I would let the door open to every single possibility. Personally, I am not worried about anything harmful. I'm more curious, but anything is possible again.
But the name of the book is The New Science of UFOs. It's a new insight. It's an amazing story on a scientific journey, unraveling the UFO mystery, one layer at a time, critically examining old clues into a new light while looking into entirely new clues. And, of course, as you know on this program over the years, we have done many things dealing with this incredible story. They used government photos, graphics from NASA, understanding illustrations to talk about all of that. Their detective work stays within the bounds of science, but goes right up to the edge and maybe a little beyond. For instance, we ask whether some UFOs could use the same technology of those advanced NASA-funded flying saucers that levitate on invisible beings. Do you think, Chris, that we're going to ever get the real answers? Will we ever find out? It's been going on for years.
I'm hoping we will, and that's the reason why we're writing this book, to help people figure out what all the possibilities. We're going very deep into technology. Eric went very deep into research and finding and explaining all the different possible explanations. So I am confident that we're going to find an answer. But again, we might have to look for an answer in places that we haven't looked before. So we might just take the same data that we have, but interpret it differently. And that's what Eric is explaining in the book. Just shift everything around and don't trust and don't take everything that we know for granted, but find alternative explanations. Imagine the unimaginable. Just be very open to all the different possibilities, and that's our point in our book.
What do you think people are saying when they claim to have been abducted by extraterrestrials? What do you think is happening to them medically?
Well, that I'm very curious about. And usually when I'm presented with cases like this, I like to know what really happened, what are the details, but also what happened before in their life, what happened afterwards, what symptoms do they have? Do they have also any headache, any trouble with vision? I mean, some people have been in contact with extraterrestrial and they have symptoms, and because of the symptoms, we did MRIs of their brain, and we found abnormal white patches for some people in the brain of people exposed to UFOs. So, patches similar to the white patches in people suffering from multiple sclerosis, for example. Some other people, there's burns on the skin similar to radiation burns. That's according to the Pentagon report. So there are people that really describe things that we can see observables. We can see really symptoms, and we can see at MRIs, we can see objective signs. For other people, we don't see objective signs, but it's very interesting to know all the details and ask them questions, and also to do MRIs of their brain and see what we can find.
This hour with Dr. Eric Haseltine and Dr. Chris Gilbert, we're talking about their new book, The New Science of UFOs. Their websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Dr. Eric, the subtitle of the book, The New Science of UFOs, says New Insights into an Old Mystery. What might those new insights be?
To me, the biggest insight, when I look at all of the sightings that have been reported by the Pentagon, is that we don't even have in physics or in aeronautical engineering a theory to describe what we're seeing. And what I'm talking about when I say theory is even things as far out as warp drives and wormhole travel, which we think are potentially theoretically possible if something like negative energy exists, which it might. Even with those, we can't explain what we're seeing. For example, if you had a warp drive, which basically changes space-time to allow a craft to surf through space-time potentially faster than light, that wouldn't account for what we're seeing because it would create huge gravitational lenses that would distort the optics of the atmosphere. And that's not what we're seeing. So that, to me, was the biggest, oh, my God. I spent a year looking into physics, talking to physicists, NASA, and so forth. And that, to me, is the biggest insight, that we're looking at something so far beyond the science that we can grasp that it's not even clear we'll ever be able to understand it.
How many years ahead do you think they are?
It's really hard to say because the pace of change is accelerating. But I would say easily 100, more than that. Since we don't know what it is, I think that the science that we're seeing is not science that we're even aware of yet. And when you think about it, 100 years ago, we didn't even know there was such a thing as dark energy or dark matter.
Right.
Now we do know. But what's the next dark matter? And what's the next dark energy that we have yet to discover? And it could be in those realms that physics we just don't understand. And that's what I think is happening. And I think a lot of physicists also believe that. Oh, it's beyond dramatic. The thing that's most shocking is the instantaneous acceleration and deceleration without any noise, any sonic boom. And we just have no idea how that could be possible. Unless, as I said before, at least some of these might be zero-mass objects like holographic projections, which is possible. And like you say, the Navy's done that. I don't think that accounts for everything because those require the emission of a lot of light. And a lot of these UFOs don't emit light in anywhere near the way that those technologies would.
And what about the technology where so many people have reported seeing UFOs just appear and disappear? Just poof, they're gone.
Well, again, there are two ways to look at that. If you look at the physics we know, I could do that. When I was at Disney Imagineering, I developed these holographic laser projections. They basically create ball lightning and move it around essentially at the speed of light. And that is doable, and the Navy has done that, and that would account for some, but not all, or even the majority of sightings. So the bottom line is, I don't have a clue. No one has a clue.
Chris, of everything you've investigated with UFOs with your husband Eric here, what have you found to be the most fascinating aspect of all of this?
What I found to be the most fascinating is life form. Is like we found, are they life forms that can have extreme acceleration and deceleration, withstand that? And yes, they are. There are tardigrades that can sustain 16,000 Gs, like 16,000 times the force of gravity, when a human will be killed by a sustained exposure of 16 Gs. Like fruit flies, those insects are surprisingly tough. They're able to withstand up to 17,000 times the force of gravity.
Yeah.
And roundworms, like nematodes, roundworm, they are very resistant. They can withstand up to 80,000 times the force of gravity. Not only that, but in 2023, did you know that it was reported that an individual nematode, the roundworm, had been revived after 46,000 years in Siberian permafrost? To me, that's unbelievable. But also, we discovered that as far as radiation exposure resistance, there are fungi that feed on radiation. They're called radiotrophic fungi, and they've been found in Chernobyl after the nuclear leak. So those fungi perform radiosynthesis, which means that they're using ionizing radiations as an energy source. This just fascinates me.
I want to thank you for being part of the program. Dr. Chris, thank you as well.
It's been a lot of fun, George. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much, George.
Both of you take care of yourself. I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.